Have you ever driven so far that the road just ends? Where your GPS gives up and the only thing talking back is the wind? That's exactly where Evelyn Hart found herself. At 32, she was an award-winning wildlife photographer, a master at capturing beauty in the world's most desolate corners. But the beauty in her own life had shattered. Her last exhibition in Seattle was a triumph. The applause, the champagne. Everything was perfect, except for the deafening silence from the man she thought she'd spend her life with. "You loved moments more than people," he'd said. The worst part. He was right. So, she did what she knew best. Se Banisit, with 2 cameras, 1 coat, and a heart full of an ache so deep it felt like an echo. She flew to anchor. She rented a beat-up, rust-colored truck that smelled of old gasoline and fresh rain, and just drove north. She drove until the radio's songs dissolved into static, telling herself she was chasing the light, the perfect shot. But deep down, she knew she was running from it, running from the life that had gone dark. At a dusty diner near Denali, the locals knew her as the lady with the lens. They'd shake their heads, offering warnings about the brutal winter storms that were brewing. Evelyn would just offer a thin, tired smile and return the smile of someone who felt they had nothing left to lose. Angie D. Get back in her truck and keep driving. By the 5th day, she was completely untethered, somewhere between nowhere and gone. A frozen river snaked along one side of the road, and on the other, mountains stood like jagged teeth against the sky. This was it. This was the place. She parked the truck, and as she stepped out, the Arctic air bit at her lungs. It was a sharp, clean pain. She lifted her camera. The shutter clicked once, then twice. In that frozen landscape, the sound was her only proof that she still existed. And then, just like that, the world changed. The sky turned a bruised, angry gray. The wind didn't just blow. It slammed through the valley, sharp and unforgiving. Snow started falling, not down, but sideways, like a curtain being violently drawn across the world. She scrambled back to the truck, her fingers fumbling with the key. She turned it. Nothing, just a weak cough from the engine, and then silence. The world outside disappeared into a swirling vortex of white. Inside the cab, a chilling cold began to seep through the metal. She wrapped herself in a thin blanket, telling herself she just had to wait it out. But the hours bled into a long, dark night. The cold wasn't just outside anymore. It was inside her, creeping closer with every shallow breath she took. She tried the radio. Her phone both were dead. Lifeless. When she exhaled, her breath hung in the air like a tiny ghost. For the first time in years, a genuine fear took hold of her. It wasn't the fear of dying, but something worse. The fear of being forgotten, of vanishing without a trace. Just as despair began to set in, she saw it. A soft, flickering glow in the heart of the storm. A lantern, swinging back and forth. Slowly, an outline of a person emerged from the blizzard, growing clearer with each step. A firm knock echoed on her window. A voice, deep and rough as gravel, cut through the howling wind. "Ma'am," it said, "you picked a hell of a night to chase pictures." His name was Jonas Pike, a search and rescue volunteer, a part-time mechanic, and a full-time philosopher of solitude. He smelled of diesel and pine, and his coat looked like it had seen more winters than her truck. He didn't bombard her with questions. He didn't need to. He simply opened the door, offered a steady hand, and led her through the blinding snow toward a faint orange light, a beacon of warmth in the vast, frozen emptiness. And that is how Evelyn Hart was rescued from the storm. Jonas's cabin stood defiantly at the edge of the timberline, a fortress of wood, iron, and sheer stubbornness holding its ground against the relentless mountain wind. The air inside was a comforting mix of wood smoke, strong coffee, and a profound, settled quiet. He poured coffee into a chipped ceramic mug, the dark liquid steaming in the cold air. "Drink this before it freezes," he said, his voice a low rumble. The steam rose between them, a fleeting ghost in the space they shared. Evelyn's gaze drifted around the small lived-in space. The walls were a collage of his life. Topographical maps were pinned up, their surfaces traced with roots and notes. Tools were stacked in organized chaos on a workbench. And then there were the photographs, old, unframed, and achingly honest. One caught her eye. A sled dog frozen mid-leap, a blur of joyous energy. Another showed a woman in a bright red coat, her head tilted back, smiling at something just beyond the frame. "She yours?" Evelyn asked, her voice soft, careful not to disturb the room's heavy silence. Jonas gave a single, slow nod. "Was," he replied, his gaze distant. "5 winters ago." The silence returned then, but it wasn't a cruel or awkward one. It was a silence that held history, a quiet acknowledgement of a life lived before she arrived. And so, the storm raged on outside, trapping them together, 2 strangers in a world shrunk to the size of a single room. Days blurred into a simple, shared rhythm. They were 2 celestial bodies that had fallen into an unlikely orbit within the same small universe. She would boil water for coffee and tea. He would go out into the biting cold and return with freshly chopped wood, his breath pluming in the frigid air. When his old reliable camera finally jammed, she, with her photographer's gentle hands, coaxed it back to life. When a persistent drip began to form from a leak in the roof, he climbed up and fixed it, his movements sure and practiced. They didn't talk much, not in the beginning. Words seemed too loud for the space, but they communicated in other ways, in the passing of a tool, in the shared warmth of the fire, in the quiet understanding of each other's tasks. It was a language of action, not speech. Sometimes she would catch him watching her, his expression not one of desire, but of pure, unadulterated curiosity. It was as if he was trying to remember what the presence of another person felt like, studying the lines of her face as she read a book or stared into the flames. And sometimes he'd find her outside, bundled against the cold, her own camera in hand. She wasn't capturing the grand, sweeping vistas of the mountains. Instead, she was focused on the small, intimate details. The delicate, intricate way the frost curled like lace on the window pane, or the way the smoke from the chimney rose in a straight, steady column like a prayer offered up to the vast, empty sky. She was seeing the beauty in their confinement, finding art in their isolation. One night, the storm howled its loudest, and the wind rattled the window panes. They sat by the fire, the crackling flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. A single lantern sat on the floor between them, its soft glow creating a small island of light in the darkness. The silence had become comfortable, a shared blanket. It was Jonas who broke it, his voice barely a whisper above the fire's pop and hiss. "Why'd you come this far out?" he asked, his eyes fixed on the flames. Evelyn didn't look at him. She stared into the fire, too, as if the answer was written in the embers. "To prove I could be alone," she said, the words simple and honest. A half-smile touched Jonas's lips, a flicker of amusement in his tired eyes. "How's that going for you?" he asked, a gentle tease in his tone. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The fire popped and crackled, speaking for her. And in that shared moment, a new kind of understanding bloomed between them. The need to be alone was being replaced by the simple, unexpected comfort of not being. By the time the relentless fury of the storm began to ease, a strange reluctance had settled over the cabin. Neither of them mentioned the clearing sky or the softening wind. The world outside was being reborn, the endless white snow glinting under the returning sunlight like powdered glass. But inside, their movements became slower, more deliberate, almost careful. It was as if they were afraid that any sudden motion, unallowed word, might shatter the fragile peace they had built. Then, something remarkable happened. She was telling him a story about a misadventure in a city far away, and a laugh escaped her small at first, then growing into a genuine, clear sound that filled the quiet cabin. It was a sound that hadn't been heard in that space for a very, very long time, and Jonas found himself listening for it, waiting for it, the sound of life returning to the silent walls. Later, he showed her how to start the generator. In the cramped space of the woodshed, he guided her hand to the pull cord. As he did, their hands brushed against each other. It was quick, accidental, but it sent a jolt through them. Both an electric spark of connection in the cold air. They both pulled back slightly, their eyes meeting for a brief, charged moment before looking away. a silent acknowledgement of the shift that had occurred. That night, Evelyn worked by a lantern light, developing the photos she had taken during the storm. She watched the images slowly appear in the chemical bath, and she saw that everything had changed. Her photographs were no longer about distance, about the vast, lonely emptiness of the landscape. They were about warmth. They were pictures of the cabin's interior, the play of firelight on the wooden walls, the steam rising from a coffee mug. They were about the small, intimate details that made a house a home. Jonas stood quietly in the doorway, watching her work. He saw the passion in her focus, the joy in her creation, and as he looked around the cabin, at the warmth emanating from the fire, at the quiet industry of the woman hunched over her photographs, he realized something profound. His home, his sanctuary of solitude, hadn't felt truly alive in 5 long years, not since the woman in the red coat. Until now, the storm had passed, but inside the cabin, something new had just begun. The sky that morning was a breathtaking, impossible blue, so clear it almost hurt to look at. Evelyn methodically packed her gear, each movement a deliberate act of will. She kept telling herself it was time to leave. The road would reopen soon, and her other life, the one with deadlines and city noise, was waiting. She couldn't stay here forever, nestled in this remote cabin, shielded from the world. Jonas moved around her in a quiet dance, filling her thermos with hot coffee, checking the pressure in the truck's tires. He said almost nothing, his silence louder than any words of protest. "You'll find your way back?" he asked, his voice low. "I think so," she replied, her own voice betraying her uncertainty. "Then you should go," he said, turning his gaze to the window. "While the weather holds." She started the truck, the engine's hum a familiar comfort. Her breath fogged the cold windshield as she pulled away from the cabin and started down the trail. The world outside was a pristine canvas of white and blue. But after just half a mile, she had to stop. The river, which had been frozen solid for weeks, was now shimmering under the bright sunlight. A thin crust of ice was splitting open, revealing the dark, running water beneath. A perfect shot. One last photo to remember this place before she said goodbye for good. She grabbed her camera, her heart thumping a strange rhythm against her ribs. She stepped out of the truck, the cold air a sharp slap against her face. She moved closer to the river's edge, framing the shot, lost in the beauty of the light on the water. Just a little closer. Too close. The world tilted on its axis. A sharp crack, like a gunshot, echoed in the silent air. The ice gave way beneath her feet, and suddenly, she was plunging into the black, biting water. The shock stole the air from her lungs. The weight of her camera slammed against her chest, dragging her down. Panic seized her as the icy current grabbed hold, pulling her under. She kicked, she thrashed, she tried to scream, but the sound was swallowed by the dark, suffocating silence of the river. Then, through the roaring in her ears, she heard it. A distant shout. Her name. Jonas. He was running, a coil of rope slung over his shoulder, moving with a desperate speed as if the earth itself were propelling him forward. He didn't hesitate. He slid onto the treacherous ice, his focus locked on the spot where she had disappeared. He threw the line, the rope unspooling through the air, landing just within her reach. Her numb fingers fumbled, then closed around it. He pulled, his muscles straining, fighting the river's relentless pull. Inch by agonizing inch, he dragged her toward the edge until she finally burst from the water, gasping, shaking, but miraculously alive. Back in the warmth of the cabin, he wrapped her in every blanket he owned. He piled log after log onto the fire, his hands trembling as he worked to chase away the bone-deep chill that had taken hold of her. The flames roared to life, casting flickering shadows on the walls. He knelt beside her, his face etched with a fear she had never seen before. "I've lost enough people to this snow," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You're not going to be one of them." A part of air, the independent, self-reliant part, wanted to tell him she wasn't his to lose. But as she huddled there, wrapped in his blankets, feeling the steady, reassuring beat of his heart against her back, she realized she already was, in some small, quiet, undeniable way. She belonged here. They didn't sleep that night. They sat by the fire, listening to the wind howl outside, a storm that paled in comparison to the one raging inside both of them. The world they had known just hours before had been washed away by the river, replaced by this raw, unspoken truth between them. As the first hint of dawn painted the window pane, he gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. His touch was featherlight, yet it sent a jolt through her. "Sometimes," he said, his gaze meeting hers, "the mountain gives back what it takes." And in that moment, Evelyn knew with absolute certainty that leaving this place, leaving him, would be infinitely harder than staying had ever been. Seattle was her world, a city of deadlines, gallery openings, and the constant hum of ambition. But something was missing. The vibrant colors she captured with her camera felt hollow, a reflection of the emptiness she felt inside, chasing a ghost, a memory of a grandfather. North, until the highways gave way to cracked asphalt, and the city lights were replaced by an endless expanse of stars. She arrived in a small, forgotten town in Alaska, a place where winter wasn't just a season, but a state of being. The cold was a physical presence, seeping into her bones, mirroring the chill in her soul. Her car, predictably, gave up, leaving her stranded, and that's when she met him. Jonas, a man who seemed as much a part of the landscape as the ancient pines and the frozen rivers. He lived in a remote cabin, a fortress of solitude against the biting wind. He was a man of few words, his silence as deep and vast as the Alaskan wilderness itself. He offered her shelter, a place to wait out the storm, both the one raging outside and the one within her. At first, the silence was deafening. The stillness of the cabin, the immense quiet of the snow-covered world. It was all so different from the constant noise of her life. She was a city bird trapped in a snow globe, restless and out of place. Jonas didn't try to fill the silence. He simply existed in it, moving with a calm purpose, chopping wood, mending nets, his hands calloused but steady. She watched him, fascinated. He spoke in short, practical sentences, but his actions spoke volumes. He showed her how to read the snow, how to listen to the language of the wind. He taught her that survival here wasn't about fighting the cold, but about understanding it, respecting Italiano. Slowly, Evelyn's camera, which had felt like a dead weight in her hands, started to feel like an extension of herself again. But her subject matter had changed. One evening, as they sat by the crackling fire, the only sound the hiss of burning cedar, she asked him why he chose to live so far from everything. He looked into the flames for a long moment before answering. "Some folks are built for crowds," he said, his voice a low rumble. "And some of us, we need the quiet to hear ourselves think." It was a simple statement, but for Evelyn, it was a revelation. All her life, she had been running, chasing, striving, filling every moment with noise and activity, terrified of what she might hear in the silence. The days bled into weeks. The initial awkwardness, they developed a rhythm, a silent dance of two solitary souls sharing a space. She'd wake to the smell of coffee and his freshly baked bread. He'd find her lost in her viewfinder, capturing a moment of fleeting light. They rarely spoke of their pasts. There was no need. In the vast, white wilderness, they were simply two people, present and real. The cold that had once felt so threatening now felt cleansing, stripping away all the non-essentials, leaving only what truly mattered. One night, the sky outside their small cabin window began to glow. Jonas led her outside, and she gasped. Ribbons of green and purple light danced across the heavens, a celestial ballet of breathtaking beauty. The northern lights. She had seen pictures, but nothing could have prepared her for the silent, overwhelming majesty of it. She lifted her camera, but Jonas gently placed a hand on her arm. "Just watch," he whispered. "Sometimes, the best pictures are the ones you keep for yourself." And in that moment, standing beside him under the shimmering aurora, Evelyn felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the fire inside. It was a feeling of connection, of being exactly where she was supposed to be. But as the snow began to melt and the first signs of spring emerged, a familiar anxiety started to creep back in. The world she had left behind was calling. Her gallery, her deadlines, the life that paid her bills, the forgiveness of spring arrived. Rivers, once frozen solid, began to run again. The cabin, which had smelled of wood smoke and confinement, now filled with the scent of cedar and fresh bread. Evelyn's photographs changed, too. They were no longer just images of a stark, cold landscape. Now, they carried warmth, the shimmer of life, returning after the long, hard winter. She knew she had to leave. She told Jonas, the words feeling like stones in her mouth. She had to go back to her gallery, her responsibilities, the city that defined her success. He didn't argue. He just nodded his gaze steady. "Come back when the lights return," he said. "They're best in November." It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a plea. It was just an invitation, open and simple, like the man himself. Back in Seattle, the city felt different. It was louder, brasher, and somehow smaller than she remembered. The endless noise she once thrived on now felt jarring. Her apartment, once a sanctuary, felt like a cage. But her work had never been better. She put together a new exhibition, filling the gallery with the soul of Alaska. In every frame, you could feel the biting cold, the vast silence, and the resilient warmth she had discovered there. She called the exhibition Quiet Fire. The centerpiece was a single, powerful photograph. A cabin, half buried in a sea of pristine snow, with a thin curl of smoke rising from its chimney like a memory. In the doorway stood a silhouette, a man looking up at the sky. It was a picture of solitude, but not loneliness. It was a picture of peace. During the opening, a critic asked her what had inspired this dramatic shift in her work. Evelyn smiled. A soft, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Sometimes," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper in the crowded room, "the coldest places teach you the warmest truths." The exhibition was a huge success, but the accolades felt distant, hollow. The praise and the congratulations couldn't fill the quiet ache in her chest. The months passed in a blur of city life. Summer faded into autumn. And then November came. The air grew crisp, and the nights grew long. And with the change in season, an undeniable pull, a magnetic north, tugged at her heart. She didn't overthink it. She didn't make a plan. She simply packed a bag, got in her truck, and started driving. Back up that same cracked road, past the sleeping towns and silent forests. As she drew closer, she saw it, a faint shimmer of green on the horizon. The lights had returned. He was there, on the porch, mending a sled harness, his movements as patient and deliberate as ever. He looked up as her truck crunched to a stop on the gravel. He saw her, and a slow, quiet grin spread across his face. A grin that could melt winter itself. "Took you long enough," he said. The words were simple, but they held a world of meaning. She laughed, a real, unburdened sound that startled even the sled dogs, who perked up their ears. They didn't talk about forever. They didn't need to make grand declarations or promises for the future. They just stood there, side by side on the porch, as the sky above them burned with impossible color. It was flame over ice, love over solitude. And in that shared silence, a profound truth settled between them. Some fires never roar. They don't need to shout to be felt. They just whisper. They glow, steady and constant. A quiet fire burning against the cold. And they survive. Thank you so much for joining me for this story. I hope it brought a little warmth to your day. If you enjoyed it, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more stories like this. It really helps us out. Until next time, stay warm and take care.